Tēnā tātou katoa, ko ai au I te taho tōku pāpa, ko puki haua me puki hui ana maunga, ko tau ka hawai te awa, ko Ngāpui Rau, ko Ngāti Parau, Ngā Iwi, ko Kiri Butler tōku ingoa. So I'm the chair for this session. It's my first time chairing, so I'm a little bit nervous and I'm trying to, be really, really good on times and things like that. But yeah, it's my absolute pleasure to be able to introduce these sessions today as well. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker this afternoon, who is Bianca Stawiarski, aroha mai, and her kōrero this afternoon is on integrating Ngardi, Guwanda, community-led, locally driven women's empowerment projects. So, homai te Paki whānau.
Thank you so much. And yeah, Bianca Stawiarski or Bianca Stawiarski. No one else can get it right, so don't worry. You are not alone. Oh, and here it is here. So, integrating Ngardi Guwanda. So Ngardi Guwanda means thinking, listening, feeling strongly. And each of our mobs around the world had this practice and still do. Some call it deep listening. Some call it te diri. In my language, Barimaya, it's Ngardi Guwanda. So firstly, I wanted to honour and pay my respects to the traditional custodians here. First time on this country and it's beautiful. And also recognise their continuing connection to elders past and present and their connection to land, ancestors, waterways, seas and everything else. And we've been welcomed so beautifully yesterday. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a background about me. I run an international company, First Nations social enterprise called Warrada Holistic Wellness. Warrada means wedge-tail eagle in my Barimaya language, and it's my family's totem, basically. And so I'm a Barimaya, an Ukrainian woman, so Barimaya is from Midwest Western Australia. But I was born on Kaurna country and I've spent the majority of my life on Kaurna and Paramount country. Now, Kaurna country is in Adelaide, so I live in the northeast Adelaide Hills. So I'm an allied health professional in the mental health space and also an Indigenous healing practitioner, and I'm also an entrepreneur. So what I wanted to do as part of my PhD research, so this is early stages, part of my PhD research with Batchelor Institute of Indigenous Tertiary Education, and I specifically chose Batchelor in Northern Territory because of their two-way learning and of privileging First Nations knowledges. And so it's so cool when you can talk to the Dean and you can say, I went to bed last night asking ancestors about what this text needs to show me, and I wake up and I get that inspiration, I get a message, and then you can tell the dean of a university that, and then she says, and now you just have to write about it. Now that is so freeing when every person in that room is a First Nations scholar from remote communities to city areas, that the professors are all First Nations, that the texts that you're reading, we privilege First Nations scholars and academics. That's cool. It's really exciting to be part of a cohort like that, where you've got 15 people in the same room that are all doing stuff for their community. So what I wanted to do was, during my tertiary training, I did counselling, and of course it just didn't resonate with me. What I found was that, that Western approach, that Western boundaries, that, the whole way of not letting people know who you are and where you're from and what you're about, just didn't work. And like many other First Nations therapists, they leave the room, they leave their tertiary qualification and they have to forget everything that they do. So I wanted to look at what it is about healing. I spent a lot of time in that trauma space, but what I wanted to do was go, what is it about healing that actually doesn't need to be talking about trauma? And because I'm sort of sitting in between Indigenous allied health and Indigenous entrepreneurship, I wanted to have something that was in that space. And it's interesting, I can't even read the screen, by the way, it's so small. But, so what I did at the moment is I looked at Dreezy and Mazurki. Like I said, I can't read that. I looked at their scale, and I thought, you've actually missed a point, and that's locally empowered. So you talk about, Aboriginal people doing Aboriginal research, which is absolutely deadly. What about local Aboriginal people doing local research? And so I adapted this model and added another square, so buy local, locally empowered. And because what this is about, and everyone's talked about this all day, is it's mob defining success for ourselves. Mob defining our research, the research parameters, what we look at, and what we actually say is successful. So I'm eventually going to get to what I'm actually here to yarn about. So I looked at doing this enormous PhD project. That's what we do with community, isn't it? We want to actually create change. And so we go, it needs to look like this. And then my primary supervisor said, I think it's about 15 PhDs all at once. I think you need to actually sort of squash it down a little bit. So I ended up coming up with 2 streams. And the key there, we hold our own answers. We don't need anyone to tell us what the answers are. We've actually got them for ourselves in our communities. And so what I looked at, so I've had to revise it since I submitted this abstract. So the question I've revised it to is, can a locally led circular research model positively contribute to the outcomes of women's empowerment programs for entrepreneurship? Because healing and then moving into entrepreneurship gives us economic empowerment, which gives women choices. And as we know, women want our communities to come along with us. We want families and community to come with us. We don't want to just actually succeed and create change for ourselves. We want everyone to come together. We want balance in our communities. And the other thing also was I didn't want the people I'm researching, do it with those things, to be participants. They're co-collaborators. They're co-designing the project and the process. Each of these people have their own knowledges and their skills and understanding and reflection and ideas and expertise. So to call them participants is actually, I found quite derogatory. So then what I thought was, we normally say we'd like a cultural advisor or something like that. And so I wanted to have a circle of elders, a knowledge circle. And through that process, we start to co-design. And underpinning the framework is Pokalanui's 5 Stages of Decolonisation. If you haven't read it, oh my gosh, go and have a look for it. And then also Lorraine Muller's 6 Stages of Decolonisation. She adapted Lanui's 5 stages, who just so happens to be my PhD supervisor. I read her paper and then went and approached her directly to be my supervisor. So they underpin that healing approach. And then to ensure data sovereignty, to look at how can we actually keep those knowledges outside of the university system, because we know what happens with research, it gets pulled into a university system. So the actual workshops, the yarning circles, the empowerment workshops for female entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurial workshops to take them through, that's separate. That's separate to the PhD research, and I'm going to look at the model. And you can see there, Billa Empower is, and I'll give them a little plug, a national Aboriginal charity that we've started here on Ghana, or started on Ghana country, and we're the first Indigenous-led national employment assistance program provider in Australia. So everybody is First Nations. So I wanted to talk about this very quickly because I'm probably running out of time. So here's a model, and this is draft. It's changing every single day. So I looked at this framework because I use this as a way to explain this to elders about what I'm doing. Now, I'm sure across your various countries, we always hear about making sure we have elders support or community support, but we're actually rarely looking at what that actually is. And that's a community ethics. We look at Western ethics and that's held as this premier thing, but we're actually, First Nations communities, First Nations researchers go through two ethical approaches. One is community ethics and one's Western ethics. And so what I wanted to do was name that. And so I've been using this diagram as a way to explain to elders and community what it is I'm actually trying to do here. And the interesting thing, and I'm sure that you probably have similar things, is that once elders and community give permission and you go through that ethics, they go, all right, come on, girlie, what's stopping you? And now you have to go through the Western ethics approach, which gets quite frustrating because community wants this to all happen. And so what I wanted to show was that there was this process, creating the framework, working with the elders. They determine what this is going to be called. I use Buddy Maya because that's my language. But elders were going to be on Ghana country. And so they might come up with a completely different name for what this might look like. And so working with the knowledge circle or whatever name they come up with, and then moving through that space, creating a framework, bringing it back to community. It's going to be about 15 community members of that, paying each and every one of them for their time and knowledge and skills and expertise. A lot of the elders on Ghana country actually prefer things like Coles vouchers or things because it doesn't impact their pensions and things like that, but paying them in some form. That's that reciprocal, or in my language, ngalami yugaja, that's that giving back. We give back to each other, recognising that so many times our elders are giving knowledge and having nothing for it in return. And I'm not just talking about financial either. And so then bringing it to community, creating this, bringing it back, and the plan is, when you get to, I think it's step 9, is that on that second stream that's not part of the PhD, is that we actually employ local facilitators to facilitate the workshops. So I work with the local facilitators. I'm a local facilitator myself. Support them, train them up, pay them equal to what they're actually doing, recognising that they're actually, delivering this incredible service. They have skills, not paying them chicken feed. So that got quite scary for some people when I submitted my very big budget. And then that can then move on to something a bit bigger. And so then that knowledge is held by the community. The difference with this, it's not just women's empowerment projects for entrepreneurship. It's actually, we have a concurrent men's program that runs along this. And if you identify differently, on Ghana country, we slot into which one, men's or women's, that we identify more with. And so the idea is a whole community is being raised, being decided in the way we want to decide it, run the way we want it to look, and then bringing it back. So at the moment, I'm at the Western ethics approach, the process, and I hope to navigate through that finalise that very soon. But as you can imagine, it's a long process. but I'm just really excited about what this could mean for people on Kaurna country. And not necessarily just Kaurna people, because it's a city, so we have a lot of mob from different countries living there. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, and then in that not being looked at the same time as the men's side, but it is a concurrent program. And I would love your feedback or suggestions. So that QR code will take you to a little jot form, and it's a free text area. And if you can just give me some suggestions or maybe recognition. It was so amazing because last night I actually got this woman sat next to me, and she asked me, she said to me, "Oh, have you heard about the Aboriginal Empowerment Project, Women's Empowerment Project on Kaurna country?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "This woman," and I went, "McCallum, and I went, "Oh, McCallum, Jana McCallum," and then she turns around and goes, and it's her sitting next to me. I didn't even know who she was, but I knew the name. And so it's those kinds of connections that just ancestors just show up and they create a space for us so that we can have this yarn about what was done through the project that she researched. For me, it's always got to have something to do with entrepreneurship, which isn't about being financially viable. We still need to be financially viable, but it's about how we give back to our communities. So healing is how we give back to communities. Because we know that mob employ mob. You're more likely to actually do that when you're actually got a successful, thriving business that is integrated with community values. So, any questions? Yes.
Did you have to refer back to the Western?
Yes, ethics.
Yeah.
As anyone who's doing research, because of what has been done in damage to our communities, the ethics process, the Western ethic process, is actually quite extensive in a way of trying to protect us. That's why locally empowered research is so important. Research done by mob, for mob, with mob. That's the bit that's the important part. But yeah, we still have to go through that process. And it seems silly, like how many, are Aboriginal people involved in the research? Yeah, they are. All of those questions that you have to then explain what a yarning circle is and all of those things that we just, that this first picture is actually on the property where I live. It's a bit of Gubala, which means becoming quiet, the yarning circle. And it was interesting, I heard an old lady once say to me, she came out and she watched me, she'd brought someone out to come and see me, and she said, "Oh my gosh, it's like how we always used to heal. Why do we need to be in a room?" That's the question. We don't. And so that's part of how we're doing this. This process isn't going to be in a room. It's going to be outside, on country, because that's the way we do it.
So how would you hold the authenticity of your cultural ethos, when you're having to reference the kaupapa of Pākehā?
And that is the bit about it's so difficult, but what we do is we make sure that we privilege First Nations scholars. This morning, Tuiai Smith, they were talking about Indigenous methodologies and decolonising this. She's one of our texts. We use in Australia. It's about making sure that if there's, and it was beautiful because one of my PhD primary supervisor said to me, "If you don't have the majority First Nation scholars, I'm not even going to read your work." That's what we do. That's how we keep our authenticity. Because, and encourage each of us to write. All the mob here, whatever country you're from, write. Put it in a journal article. That's what we need. Auntie at the back.
We've always been researchers from time immemorial. And then the colonisers came in and they told us that we didn't know anything. So they took over the power that we had to know our country, to know what the animals, the plants and everything was doing. So it's actually about reclaiming that power within us to know ourselves and know our country. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Auntie. And that's it. Defining success for us. Yeah, sorry.
Just last part I hear, if that's okay. Thank you.
Just being really more familiar with kaupapa Māori methodologies and less so about Aboriginal Australian ones, which sound so beautiful. I love the idea of yarning circles, but I feel like here in Aotearoa there's a growing recognition for the structure of kaupapa Māori methodologies and ethics in our research, and that allows a lot of autonomy and flexibility. So my question is there a growing recognition for the same in Australia, and how is that becoming kind of maybe nationally unified, or is it more context specific to different areas? What's that looking like in Australia?
Yeah, because we have so many different communities, languages, countries, very different to here. There's a reason why I chose Batchelor, and that's because I didn't have to explain. I didn't have to fight against a system that other universities forced you to prove each part of what you're doing. That's the cool part. Anyway, we've got, sorry, Auntie in the corner.
I'm going to have to, just so I can make sure that, because if Wayne's anything like me, he'll be sitting there going, okay, I'm up soon. So, yeah.
So do that. Come and yarn to me. Send me a message, whatever. I'd love to hear your comments. And if you're doing research, I'd love to hear about it too.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bianca.